Hey, what's up? It's Frank here from datadriven.tv, franksworld.com, and I know I have another URL, impactquantum.com. How's it going? Today's Saturday. How was your week? Um, just want to give a quick shout out to the folks that are watching on LinkedIn Live, YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and Periscope. Although it's my understanding that Periscope is being discontinued in a few months, so I'll have to find another platform to stream on to connect to my Twitter account. My Twitter account, speaking of which, let me pull up the graphics. Things are a little slower because I'm doing this on my phone, but I mean, let's just appreciate the fact that I'm live streaming from a phone entirely wirelessly, which at one point was science fiction. There are some features apparently that are not available here, but so I'm in my car. Don't worry, I'm not driving, but wanted to reflect on some of the lessons I learned this week, and hope you had a great week. Read quite a bit this week. Started picking up the paper version of Patrick Bet-David's the 25 Laws of Success, or Doing the Impossible. I'm sorry. While I'm waiting for the kids, I picked up this book by Russell Brunson about traffic secrets and such. And so, oh, cool. I have some chat messages. So I'm also trying another experiment here on how to do chat messages. Hey, Shri, how's it going? Good morning. Although I guess since I'm streaming anywhere in the world, could be any time in the world. Hope you're well. Hope you're staying safe. This crazy pandemic and all that. So I got a lot of surprise interest in the book review I did the other day on the Mahan book, which is Let's Get Real or Let's Not Play. And I think it touched on a nerve because this is something I discovered in the last few years, certainly in 2017 for sure. I always thought of myself as a technologist and not a salesperson. In fact, I probably had rather negative connotations around salespeople. But sales is an honorable profession. I know, right? I'm waiting for the hate stream. Sales can be an honorable profession, but I think there's some bad actors that make it give it a tarnished name. One of the things that in 2017 I learned the hard way when Data Leader, when Kim Schmidt and we co-founded. Well, she kind of had it, and I joined on to help. But we tried to really sell the idea of platform evangelism or evangelism as a service. Nowadays, you see the term evangelism kind of falling out of favor. You hear developer advocates, that sort of thing. But ultimately, the way to connect marketing, sales, and engineering to a developer community or a community of customers. It's strictly not developers, although from my point of view, my experience has always been that way. Guy Kawasaki kind of founded, I call him the godfather of evangelism, and anything he's written or spoken about evangelism is totally worth reading or watching. I actually got to meet him once. He signed a book that he wrote in it was at Macworld Boston, 1995. So that's even before Frank's World was launched. That was my first major industry conference. Was Macworld Boston, 1995. It was summer. It was I basically just graduated from college, and it was a great experience. That's for sure. So the lessons I learned. What was the yeah, I totally need more Dr. Pepper. That's what I need. You're absolutely right. So Andy and I are working on a secret project. We have a code name for this secret project. You probably heard Andy and I talk about this a bunch of times. We call it Project Ringgate. Fans of The Expanse will know. and we're really hoping to put a ding into the universe, dare I say, with it. We'll see. Andy and I have agreed not to talk about it publicly until we have something to show. So that's all I'm going to say about Project Ringgate. It has a real name. That's just its code name. So the next thing I was going to say was the purpose of this live stream was me kind of talking about the importance of lifelong learning. So when I was in school, there was this notion, there was this false belief that you can get your degree in something and never learn again. Right? If you were particularly ambitious, you would have you would go to get your MBA or a master's degree. But the ultimate kind of thing was, originally, I don't know if you know this, but originally I went to college to get a degree in chemical engineering. And I think that was really built on kind of the baby boomer generation experience, and kind of, well, I don't want to pick on the boomers, but I mean, kind of before that. But the world changes so fast. And I never, once I kind of got, I have a degree in computer science. I switched my degree, and I never really embraced that idea, because in technology and IT, you really can't do that, right? There's no such thing as you get your degree in something and that's it, you learn, right? I mean, that's it, you're done. There are people, I guess, who've pulled it off, but those spots are going to be fewer and further between. So one of the things I did in 2016 was I really committed myself to lifelong learning. And that actually ties in with my change of my opinion on sales too. 2016, it was about May of 2016, I picked up the 10X Rule by Grant Cardone. I know some of my followers, particularly those who live in Miami, oddly enough, are not big fans of his. But I will say, you have to separate the message from the messenger. And I don't know enough about some of the controversies around him, nor do I really need to. Real estate development is a kind of a messy business, and there's always gonna be lawsuits. That's kind of my armchair historian view. But that's not what this is about. When I listened to the 10X Rule, it was basically kind of an eye-opening in the sense that, one, you have to commit to constantly working on yourself and upping your game and being better each and every day. That is non-negotiable, right? That's just non-negotiable in life, unless you want to settle for mediocre, and then mediocre leads down a very, very bad path. That's what I think. I also discovered Max Out, which is Ed Mylett's podcast. Awesome podcast, awesome YouTube videos. He's a great speaker, great author. Can't recommend his stuff enough. Drop a note in the comments if you want me to put more of his content on franksworld.com. Had a pretty good reaction to his to a post I shared last Sunday. There's just so much negativity in the world. I think it's worth injecting some positivity and some outlook, because you can't change the world if you can't change yourself. You can't make the world better if you don't make yourself better. So to that end, one of the things I really like about Pluralsight is they actually have gamification of learning, right? So I'm not paid by Pluralsight. I almost made a class for them, but the employer I had at the time, about 10 years ago, decided that any money I made with them, even if it was on my own time, belonged to them. So in careful kind of thinking and talking with my family, I decided to bow out of the course. But that's a story for another day. As you can tell, I want to stay on topic. So it's really cool, and I'm celebrating this week, because this week I hit 100 consecutive days. Today is day 101 of learning on Pluralsight. Now, I know I've read books pretty much every day now for the last 4 years, with the possible exception of maybe like a couple of days here and there. But it's cool to be able to see that, to be able to track that, right? And what's the saying? What gets measured gets tracked, and what gets tracked gets improved. And I've been able to learn quite a lot of stuff. Most of it's data science, most of it's data engineering. But what's really cool about Pluralsight and LinkedIn Learning is that they also have courses on career development, as well as some of the more fun kind of graphic design, motion graphics, that sort of thing. If you're a follower of my stream, you've probably seen some of the better motion graphic stuff I've done. which you'll see soon will tie in pretty nicely with Project Ringgate. But you have to commit to lifelong learning, probably in every field now. And if that field's not like that, it's going to change. The world is changing faster than ever, good, bad, or indifferent. You can't control that, but you can control how you react to it. You can control your mindset. You can control how you adapt. And I have some acquaintances that kind of rib me for always learning, always pushing for new certifications, right? Because quote unquote, I don't need to anymore. And that maybe I don't, but that's not what it's about. It's about being a better person, being a better data engineer, being a better father, being a better technology architect, right? Learning how to sell and influence, right? Which is an important skill, because I mean, if you have to get your kids dressed for school, you have to convince them to do that. You have to convince and influence your children to pick up the floor. You have to convince the dog to go outside. I mean, this influence is such an important, crucial skill for any social creature. And I think that sales gets a bad rap. Yes, it does. A lot of the sales gurus, they get a bad rap too, I guess, by some people. But for me personally, I love consuming the messages of positivity, of growth, servant leadership, right? Because how do you, if you truly have a solution, one, if you're not selling something you don't believe in, you have no business selling it, right? I'm not going to go so far as call it unethical, but I use the word. But if you have a solution that will change people's lives, will make their lives better, will make their work better, will make them more productive, will improve their life in any meaningful way or even a subtle way, you have a moral obligation to get that message out. And in my day-to-day, where I sell, I don't really directly sell Azure solutions, but I have influence over what customers see, how they can envision, right, the art of the possible, how they can, and then craft a roadmap between here and there. Because a lot of organizations, they feel overwhelmed, right? They're just trying to keep the lights on, particularly after COVID or during COVID, because we're not after COVID yet. But how do you sell them on, there's a bright future ahead. There's a way through this. There's a way to just take the bad garbage and poop that COVID has done and turn that into compost for a beautiful garden. That's a rather flowery analogy. Maybe the coffee is kicking in and the Dr. Pepper is kicking in. But I mean, ultimately, it's really about providing a better, connecting people in need with people who have the solution, if that makes sense. So for me, those are just the 101 straight days on Pluralsight. I love Pluralsight. Can't say enough good things about them. If you follow me on Instagram, which is at Frank's World TV, you'll see I kind of post every day. And I do that not to show off, but to make myself accountable, because just the thought of having to start back at zero is just absolutely terrifying. So it's just those little things. And some days I'll watch Pluralsight for an hour. Some days it'll just be 10 minutes, maybe even 5 minutes, right? I just put it on the phone and I cast it to the TV, and I can consume that. And while I'm doing other things, right? So what? I have to go back and rewatch a segment because I wasn't able to watch everything. Doesn't matter, right? The whole paradigm of education and training has changed, right? If you have to step out and take a call in an in-person class, you missed a certain amount of that. If you don't understand what the person's saying, now you can just go back and rewatch that. That is an incredible paradigm, right? The encapsulation and storage of knowledge to that degree is going to change the world. Self-education is going to change the world. No longer do I have to go to a particular geographic location. This is going to empower the world where, people, as long as you have high-speed internet, which is a whole other thing, you have the access to so much material. And the true tragedy of that is just the garbage that people put into their brain. Now, I'm not saying everything on the internet's garbage, but I mean, we don't have a good, healthy diet of what we put in here. And I think that's the true tragedy of our age. Well, there are many tragedies of our age, but that's certainly one of them. So I'm just saying, I'm just an ordinary guy um, who fell in love with learning after a long time of being, kind of against it, not really into it, and then getting really into it, then falling out of it again, and then falling back in love with learning and being committed to lifelong learning. You know, maybe I take it a little too far, but I'd rather take it too far in improving myself. Um, Ed Milet has this saying where he believes at the end of his life he will be presented with kind of the idealized person that he could have become, and he doesn't want to be a complete. He wants to be as close to an identical uh, twin doppelganger of that as possible, and not be a complete stranger. And I like that analogy because I believe that we are here for a purpose. We are in this point in time for a purpose. Um, and there's a reason why we suffer the challenges that we do. I think of my own story, whether it was 9/11, whether it was, the death of my father, and kind of just all the garbage that I've had to go through. At each one of those junctures, I've had the opportunity, didn't always take them up, to become a better person. And when I found myself in 2016 with the concussion, with my mom sick, with all the um, getting rift and all that, and for me, I kind of had this thought where how I handled the immediate impact of 9/11 was not exactly the most positive and uplifting story in the world, but that's a story for another time. But the I kind of had this moment of clarity is that this challenges that I'm facing, and I faced them all at once. Like even the cat died. I mean, it was just ridiculous. It was a bit like a country music song. Um, I kind of had this moment of clarity because of the concussion, right? Because to just think about like, well, where am I going to go with this? Like, what's going to happen next? What am I going to do? And I kind of had this moment of clarity, call it divine intervention, or just kind of this spark of what if I took all this garbage, all this poop, and used it to become a better person. And I like to think that I did. Some people will say that I didn't. Um, but I have used that as a opportunity to be better. And particularly a concussion. I never had a concussion like that before. Usually I'd get hit in the head or whatever, and I'd be like, I'd kind of wonky for like 48 hours. I'd be fine. This was bad. I mean, I was, uh, it's hard to explain, but I don't want to get down that rabbit hole. But I realized, like, I got another comment. Cool. Thank you, sir or madam. Here we go. Do a show and tell still a viable option to convince you have to sell on top of that? Yeah. Let me finish this thought and I'll get back to you, Mohammed. Um, when you have a concussion, you can't really read, you can't really play video games or do anything that mentally taxing, but so you're kind of lost in your own thoughts. So it was a very introspective time, which at the time was horrible and terrifying, but at the time I think it was needed to really reflect on where I was going in life. Do does show and tell still a viable option to convince, or do you have to sell on top of that, knowing it takes too much time? So in my naivete, and along with my co-founder or co-partner in Data Leader, we were both evangelists, right? We thought we knew marketing. She was really good at marketing, still is. I thought I was good at pitching and presenting, doing that show and tell. But ultimately, there's a whole that gets you about 80, maybe 90% there. But you do have to sell on top of the show and tell. Show and tell will get you. I'll use a baseball analogy, although most of my audience is global, so maybe it won't work. But um, let's say marathon. Everybody runs, right? Marathon's about 26 point something miles. Um, show and tell will get you about 25 miles there. But you are not going to cross the line unless you have some kind of influence, right? Because what you have to do is people are resistant to change, even if they know they need to change. I mean, just look around your life, right? Right? People that they know smoking's killing them, right? They still do it. Um, there's a certain amount of convincing, right? There's kind of like this final thing. It's about like a door, and maybe that's why they call it closing, right? So you can close a door almost all the way, and it blocks the light, and it blocks the wind or whatever. But unless you close it all the way and it latches, you are not. It's not closed, and we would refer to it as kind of like we couldn't close a door, right? But there's a certain amount of objections you have to overcome, because especially if you're asking somebody to pay money, and you have to really convince them to open up and say, look, you have problem XYZ, you've seen what this can do, you have to take that leap, right? And no one's going to take that leap unless they're convinced that they should, right? That they should and that they can. Most of the time they can. Two, what's really incumbent on you as the salesperson is to convince them that they should. And that is, I mean, that takes a leap of faith. It takes a lot of trust building, and it takes a lot of it takes influence, to be honest with you. My kids know that they should get dressed for school, right? This is before the pandemic. But why are they goofing around playing with their toys? Right? It's about influence, right? You ultimately, I think it's about getting people to do what they know they should do and what they know they need to do, but actually executing on it. And some of that is selling the inspiration, and some of that is just showing like, look, this is the small task thing you need to do to kick off all these other things you want to do. So hopefully, Mohammed, that answers your questions. Hopefully you're still on the stream and you heard the answer. Let me know in the comments. And if I come up with something, because Lord knows that I do a lot of sidetracking. If you listen to the podcast Data Driven, Andy and I kind of do a bit of sidetracking. If I do kind of go off on a tangent and you want a better answer, just drop a comment. I always try to. I always will read every comment, and if appropriate, I will definitely like it, and I will definitely reply if I can. The LinkedIn user interface is kind of weird because it makes you, if you go into the website a certain way, if anyone knows a hack around this that's better, let me know. If you go into the video a certain way, it will not let you comment without watching the whole video. And I love hearing myself talk, but not that much. But there's another way. If you kind of click through it the right way, and maybe I'll do a screencast on those, you can actually just see the comments as text, right? So I will always endeavor to do it. And if I don't hit it up, you can always hit me up on Twitter. I'm not on Twitter as much as I used to be, but you can always hit me up there. And you can naturally, LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn a lot. And good, thank you. All right, good. I'm glad to answer your question. So Mohammed, if you really want to learn this, like I'm the super sales expert, right? I'm getting there. I am getting there. I'm trying to get better every day. The straight line persuasion. Jordan Belfort has a book. It's called The Straight Line Method or something like that. Now, Jordan Belfort is a person of well, I mean, he did jail time, right, for securities fraud and all sorts of things. And if you've seen the movie Wolf of Wall Street, that's him. But he has the straight line method, and the straight line method helped me see like how he approaches sales. And really good book. The audiobook is awesome. He reads it himself, and he always puts in these little extra anecdotes. I recommend that book. I can't recommend that book enough. That's a good one. If you don't have an Audible subscription, you can go to thedatadrivenbook.com, thedatadrivenbook.com, however you want to pronounce that, and you'll get a free audiobook on us. And if you sign up for a subscription, you'll get that. He also has a bunch of YouTube videos where he kind of teases how the straight line method works. But basically, the straight line, why it's called straight line, is you want to get your customer from point A to point B, and you don't want them to get distracted. Obviously, that's a big problem for me. But ultimately, you want to get them to where they are, find out what their objections are. And one of the things that really blew my mind was in this, maybe I'll do a book review. Drop a comment if you want me to do a book review of that book, because I've listened to that one like 3-4 times. I recommended it to a lot of folks. People will say they don't have the time or they don't have the money, right? And that's usually a smokescreen, because they just, he used the term smokescreen. So there's the excuse that they give, and then there's the real objection that they give, and there's a whole kind of process that he goes through. And I should probably reread it before I review it again. But ultimately, the goal is to keep them on a straight line between kind of like 0 to they're not interested to 10 where they're basically cutting a check. And that was the whole kind of closing instinct that I lacked when I did have my own startup in 2017, and until the wife said I had to get a real job. But ever since then, I've been committed to kind of learning how to sell, right, and do it from an ethical, honest place, right? You know, I had my choice when I rejoined Microsoft of 3 different companies to join. And, you know, I looked at the portfolio of said 3 companies, and the one I really believed in was Microsoft. I still do. I'm still there. And if you know, if you're not familiar with what my job is, I'm a technology architect at the Microsoft Technology Center, and account teams and customers come into us and they basically say, here's our problem, or this is what we want to build, and how do we get there, right? So that's, I love that, because I can guide people to their solutions, right? Because they know their problem, or maybe they don't know their problem. They just, you know, I had a customer this week, not going to reveal their name or their industry, but they deal with a lot of data, a lot of various data sources, to the point where, you know, I asked them how many data sources they had, and all they could give is a ballpark figure, because there's no governance. They're trying to build out governance, but and I think a lot of organizations, you talk about shadow IT, I think there's a whole shadow data industry, right? You know, especially with things like SaaS, right? You know, a particular hotshot salesperson can sign up for Salesforce to manage their own contacts and stuff like that. Does the enterprise know about that? I don't know. What about PII concerns? I mean, there's a that's going to be more and more of a problem. Things like governance. So I showed them Azure Purview and kind of walk them through. And Purview is an awesome product. Probably do a live stream on that. But yeah, so, you know, kind of work them through, and they left excited about the future, and that, you know, the future was within their control, within their grasp. So that's a very rewarding aspect. But I've been talking for too long. I really want to appreciate you. I just want to give a shout out to you, Mohammed, and Shri, Shri Shishar. I'm sorry if I butchered your name. I'm sorry. Thanks for sticking with me. Thanks for watching. I love doing these. Let me know in a comment if you want me to do a review of the straight line method. Maybe I'll kick off listening to that again. Yeah, because it's a good book, and it's funny. It's very nostalgic for me, because he's from New York City. He's from Queens, I think, Queens, New York. Half my family talks like that. Half my family had the exact accent of Jordan Belfort. So it's like, you know, like, it's just funny. For me, it's funny. It's like, and uses the language that he uses and stuff like that. It's funny. He's either from Queens or Long Island, but most people who live in Long Island lived in Queens at one point. But don't hate me for saying that, because I'm not. I'm sure there's exceptions to that. But yeah. So you have a fantastic Saturday. Have a great weekend, and y'all stay safe out there. Okay, now I get to figure out how to finish the video on my phone, and you get to watch me struggle with that. All right, I think I see what I need to do. So I'll close out with one of the fancy graphics things that I learned to do, so you can see what I'm talking about, and maybe kind of get a hint of what Project Ringgate will look like.